Pointer finger? Thumb. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, I want to talk to you guys about my experience at the Active Self-Protection National Conference. So this conference is a 3-day conference. I showed up the night before it started and left the day after it was over. So I was there for a total of 5 days. And during those 3 days of classes, I was able to knock out 7 whole classes, which was honestly mind-blowing that I was able to take that many classes. I was able to receive instruction from that variety of instructors, and I was able to still take away a lot from that experience, even though I was receiving so much new information. So I was able to kick off the weekend starting with Riley Bowman's pistol intelligence class. And I feel like that was the perfect way to start the weekend, not just only with Riley as an instructor, but also a lot of the things that we went over in that class. We talked a lot about kind of the basics, but we went back to the basics in the best kind of way. We revisited a lot of technique that I feel like I didn't necessarily get really grounded in when I started in shooting, and it was really interesting kind of hearing his thoughts on grip and stance. I think this is something that there's some consistencies across really great instructors, but there's also some really fine-tuned differences between them. And I find that really helpful for myself to kind of get an idea for what different instructors recommend for stance and grip and things that you would call the basics, because I can kind of plug and play the different techniques that they're using to assist me best. And I think overall, I was able to grow as a shooter in that class, even though it was just a 4-hour class. Again, I was able to kind of go back to the basics, revisit those, and establish them starting and going into this conference. So one of the main things that Riley focused on, or maybe one of the things that really stuck with me that I've been kind of continuing to work on as I've gone to the range, is the differences between grip pressure depending on the hand. So this is my dominant shooting hand, this is my support hand. And he started off the class by going around it and shaking everyone's hands to show the amount of grip pressure that he's putting on the gun depending on the hand. So when he would come around and shake our hand, my experience was that he was putting a good bit amount more pressure in with his support hand than with his dominant hand. And so going into the actual shooting portion of that class, I was able to kind of work through that. And it's kind of hard to apply something when you hear it. So it was really helpful for him to kind of go around and watch us individually shoot and give us some pointers. I know that there's a couple of things that I can take away from that class and apply at the range and work on even after the conference. So really benefited from starting the conference off with that class, and am continuing to kind of benefit from having gone back to those basics now that I'm at home and going to the range by myself again. So the next class that I got to take that day was a classroom class. And if you ever go to a conference like this, I would highly recommend that you start your day off at the range and then your next class would be a classroom class. It kind of helped me not burn out with just way too much information overload. So my next class was contextual home defense, planning and execution with Chris Cypert. And I was psyched to just take a Chris Cypert class. I've been meaning to, and I've been wanting to, and I haven't been able to make it to one yet. So it was awesome that he was at the conference and I was able to knock out, I actually wound up knocking out 2 classes with him on that first day. And let me tell you, that classroom contextual home defense class was kind of mind-blowing for me. That's not really something that I've actually dipped my toes in much yet. And I definitely learned that my house needs some fortifying features that it does not have yet. And I learned a lot about that. I can't really go over everything that he taught in that class because we talked about a lot, but we talked about reinforcing your doors. We talked about making sure that the exterior of your home is lit up enough. Essentially, you want somebody, if they're going to even consider approaching your house, you want them to feel like they're under a spotlight. You want them to feel like they don't have cover in the darkness. The next class was back to back with him, and that one was about introducing your family to the range and taking friends and family to the range. And he had a lot of really helpful insights. I think that one is actually going to go up on Active Self-Protection. I think we recorded that whole class and it's actually going to be available for you guys to watch. And I would highly, highly recommend that you go spend the time. I think it was an hour and a bit to watch that class online. If you're going to be taking friends, family, if you're going to be bold enough to take your spouse to the range, I would highly recommend you watch that video. He had a lot of really helpful insights. So the first class of the second day was by far the most difficult and the most stressful class I've ever taken in my entire life. And it was winning the fight after the fight with Terry Johnson. And I think that's actually another one that is and was recorded that you guys will actually be able to watch. And my voice is going to be in that video, and you will definitely be able to hear just how deeply distressed I was. Terry, picked two people out of the class and sort of used us as examples. So, Tessa, dial 911, you just did, this was your self-defense encounter, what are you gonna do? And I totally botched my 911 call. I did not think that that was gonna be as hard as it was, but I got caught in this loop of the 911 caller asking me a bunch of questions, and I felt like this person's an authority, and so I have to answer all of these questions. And something that I learned in that class was you don't need to answer all of those questions. And I think this is something that I really, really need to learn a lot more about is calling 911. I've actually had to call 911 in the past, like the last time I was in high school, and I'm not great with that. It's not something I'm good at. So I definitely know that's something I need to work on, and that class really brought that out in me. The second class of that day was Street Encounters / OC with Chuck Haggard. And let me tell you, I got to meet so many cool people over this weekend, and I did a really good job of not fangirling anyone but Chuck Haggard. When I met Chuck, I was honestly starstruck, which I don't think that's happened ever in my life. I was not expecting it. It was I got to meet Chuck, and it was hi, my name's Tessa. So Chuck, if you're watching this, thank you for your patience and allowing me to fangirl a little bit. But anyways, it was an awesome class. I learned a lot. The beginning part of the class was in the classroom, and Chuck talked a lot about the different OC sprays that there have been over the years, the different effectiveness, the different kind of canisters, the different kind of safeties that were available in those canisters, and the downfalls of some of those options, and then kind of rounded it all out with what he uses and recommends now, which was Palm OC spray, and he also talked a bit about Saber Red. One of the owners of Palm OC was actually in the class, and he was able to offer some of his own insights as well. It was an overall really informative class, especially for a private citizen who is carrying OC spray. And then in the second half of the class, we went downstairs, went outside, and we all got our own little inert spray. Some of us got to wear glasses, and we got to just experience what it was like to give verbal commands, have a situation kind of escalate, and then having to actually activate and use our OC spray. And that's actually something that I haven't had the opportunity to do yet. So it was really interesting to kind of see how the OC spray acts and how I acted with it. I kind of started to try to shoot it sideways for some reason, and Chuck nipped that in the butt pretty quick. You're gonna want to be using your thumb to press down on it, and we all kind of had our own tendencies. Some of us wanted to use our pointer finger, but overall he kind of guided us towards indexing our thumb on it and defeating the safety and all of those things. So it was an overall really informative class. It was really helpful for me as a private citizen carrying OC spray and kind of getting to get a feel for what an interaction would look like where I would want to use OC spray. Something that Chuck said, and I've heard it said before and I actually didn't realize that it was Chuck who said it, is that OC spray is an option to use between a harsh word and a gun. And then on day 3, I started the day off with performance handgun with AZ Zito, and I was really excited to get into this class because I had signed up for a class with him and Tim Herron a couple of months ago, and I got COVID right before the class, so I had to miss that opportunity. So I was really glad that I could jump in on a class with AZ Zito during this conference. There were a lot of things that we tackled in the 4 hours that this class took place. One of the things that I took from the class that I know that I need to work on is kind of my muscle activation and what I'm using when I'm actually shooting my gun. I tend to lock my arms. I don't hyperextend. I don't do this. I lock them in place this way. And as a result, I take recoil kind of in my body. And something that AJ was recommending that we do was actually kind of allow for our elbows to break as we're shooting, to absorb, or not absorb, but manage is one of the words he used. Instead of control, we want to manage our recoil. And that was one of the things that he was kind of trying to work out of us, was allowing that. And so that's something I've been kind of trying to implement at the range. It's something that's actually really difficult for me to do because, you know, for the last year or so, I've been shooting like this, and I worked really hard to actually get myself to activate all of this. And activating it's not a bad thing, but again, something that he wanted us to focus on was allowing for our elbows to break a little bit, which is kind of weird for me to get there. I don't think that usually when I go to a class and the instructor's trying to teach me to do something, I have like 1 second at least during the whole class where I did it right, I felt what it was like to do it right, and then I can take that home and do it. And I don't feel like I ever did it right in that class. I don't feel like I had a moment where it all kind of clicked and it was like, oh, that's how I do it. Okay, I'll work on that. So I have an idea of what I want to work on after leaving that class. And I think that from that class, I got a lot of things to take home with me. And I think that's a huge part of what we can get out of range classes like that, is essentially stuff to take home and work on. If you're leaving a class and you don't really feel like you have anything to work on after leaving the class, you probably didn't learn anything new. So I definitely learned some new things. And I think from the 2 range classes I took from that weekend, I learned that I have a lot to work on, which I knew going into it that I had a lot to work on, but now I have specific things that I want to try for myself to see how they work for me. But there are some things that will work for me that won't necessarily work for other people. And I'm looking forward to kind of pulling from the different instructors that I got to learn from and applying that to myself, and kind of getting to build my own game, if that makes sense. I'm kind of using terms that we use in jiu-jitsu as like, small people have their own jiu-jitsu game. And I think that it's kind of similar in the shooting world. Small people have their own way of attacking recoil and shooting and such, that maybe larger people or people with more muscle mass might not have to focus on as much. So overall, I have a lot to work on. And then to kind of cap off the entire weekend, my last class was another class with Chuck Haggard. We talked about ammo selection. We looked into ballistics. We looked into target choice and learned about how bullets act inside the human body. And this was definitely a topic that I went into it knowing pretty much nothing about, and walked out having gained so much. Specifically about ammo selection and how ammo acts and performs inside a ballistic gel. And ballistic gel to human body is not like a one-to-one comparison, but I learned that ballistic gel is a consistent way for us to test how ammo is going to act. So we got to witness some over-penetration. We got to learn about hollow points and how those act inside ballistic gel. We tested out different kinds of hollow points, and it was interesting to see how different hollow points act inside the human body, and not only inside the human body, but also how they perform and whether or not they actually do the job they're intended to do. And I learned about why we don't want to use FMJ for defensive purposes, and why hollow points are kind of the standard when it comes to defensive ammunition. An analogy that Chuck used in the class to kind of explain how hollow points work, that was really, really useful for me and helped me kind of understand the purpose behind them, was kind of like how the parachute works in a drag racing scenario. So the car is going full speed ahead, and without that parachute, it's just going to keep going, go through like a barricade. It's going to be an accident. It's going to be a disaster. And that's essentially what hollow points do. They go into the human body and they parachute out. And it's not that they're these just absolute death rays of bullets. It's essentially, it's used as a stopping point, which aids in preventing overpenetration. And then of course he had some really, really interesting stories to kind of share with his own experiences on how ammo actually works and what the negative outcomes outcomes of over penetration can be, specifically for him in a law enforcement situation, but those situations apply to us even as private citizens, because if we're going to be defending ourselves, it's not unlikely that we would be defending ourselves in a public place, and over penetration can lead to really similar negative outcomes. After that class, Natalie Widener actually invited me to jump in on a range monkey video over on Active Self-Protection Extra, and that was super generous of her. It was a ton of fun. We did a qual, and it was really interesting. I did a lot of things that I had never ever done before, which was like shooting from a kneeling position, shooting from around a barricade in a kneeling position, and also shooting from retention. And all of those things was something I had never ever done before, so it was really interesting tackling them all for the very first time in a qualification. So you guys can watch that really interesting video when that goes up on Active Self-Protection Extra. I'll link it up here when it's up. The last thing that I wanted to mention in this video is that Active Self-Protection and the instructors that attend and teach at this conference don't make any money from this. So the students that come, they donate a $600 donation, and that goes to the Flint Hills camp, where foster kids get to come and have a camp experience. And each person that is attending this conference donating $600 is actually allowing for one student to come to the camp. So they're doing this conference for a really awesome cause and providing a really, really awesome teaching experience for all the students that get to show up. It was an absolute joy to get to be a part of. Philster actually sent me to this conference, and I'm super thankful that they were able to do that. I was so thankful I was able to make it last minute, and I am already so looking forward to going next year, getting to take a bunch of classes. Hopefully I'll actually get to make the drive next year, have my own truck there, and get to do some camping, because camping is awesome. But we had an awesome time, and we got to enjoy some really amazing instructors, and I hope to see you guys there next year.